Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast for Black Women Connect Vancouver. Girl, you know it. So I'm the founder of Black Women Connect Vancouver, which started in 2017. And Black Women Connect Vancouver is a collective of women who come to inspire, empower, and leverage our strengths and embrace our diverse experiences. It is a community where we can build meaningful relationships and celebrate the beauty of our Black womanhood. I hope that you enjoy it. Welcome everybody to Girl You Know It. We are back for 2021 and so excited to be back with you. And it has been a really exciting time just kind of trying to figure out Black Women Connect Vancouver and our next step. And so for our first episode for season 2, episode 1, we have Lisa here with us, and we're going to be talking about entering 2021 and what does financial literacy look like. So welcome, Lisa. It's really nice to have you here. We're really excited to have this conversation with you and what we feel to have a really important discussion in our community and just questions that I know people really want to have. But before we start, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much, Nataizya. I'm very excited to be here, and so lovely to meet the three of you again on this today. So I was on the trails today. I was chatting with my girlfriend about it, and I'm like, I don't even know where to start because my typical answer would be, I'm African. I grew up in Namibia, moved to Vancouver. I've been here for the last almost 20 years now. So it's just, you've got all of this information as well, but I really wanted to kind of give a little bit about background of what it meant to grow up and to be raised sort of during apartheid in Namibia, because Namibia was part of South Africa for a very, very long time. And so about a little more than 30 years ago, we became independent. But by then I was in my teenager years, so you have basically experienced a lot of whatever was going on between Namibia and South Africa at that time. And when I look back, I kind of wonder where a lot of my being so much aware when I look at people with race in Vancouver from the beginning is coming from. It's because of this history, right? Growing up. And we were poor. I grew up really poor on a farm. My dad was hardworking, and pretty much all of my siblings ahead of me, the expectation was you're going to go to university. There was no question whether whether you should go to work after high school. It was like my sisters went to university, I had to go to university as well, and that was sort of the expectation. And to this day, I'm forever grateful that I had those experiences as well, because here were my parents who barely finished high school. I think my dad left high school in like grade 6 or 7 during those times, because he had to go and help his family. So, but yet he had, and I'm sure many of us can relate to this as having immigrant or sort of parents from Africa too, because education was their way of kind of wanting to push you to get out of your circumstances and want better for you as their child from what they were having. And to this day, I'm pushing my kids on the same thing. Even though they're growing up in Vancouver, I'm still having that sort of ingrained in me as well, even now. So I'm so forever grateful for all of the experiences I've had, because I feel, looking back, even though growing up during apartheid, it was hard, it was tough on so many of us, on all of us, but it has kind of helped me to become the person who I am today. It's kind of helped me to adjust in Vancouver over time as well. And so, yes, I went to high school, university, finished in Namibia, University of Namibia. And then I'm one of 6, so we're a big family. All my family is back in Namibia. I'm the only one here. And kind of wanted to move a little bit away from Namibia in my 20s, as most of us can, relate to some of these smaller countries. You kind of want to expand, and you want to be able to take flight and go see what else is outside of the world. And so I ended up going to Uganda with a scholarship, and studied at the University of Makerere, which was back in the day, it was probably one of the best universities in Africa as well. I always used to hear, because that's why the World Bank actually had a program that you could go there and do your master's program at university there. And that's actually where I met my ex-husband. And he was grew up in North Vancouver in Canada. And so he was just there to work for a little bit. And that's where we met. And that's how I ended up in Vancouver, because if you ever would have told me 25 years ago that I would end up in Vancouver, I would not have believed you, because as Southern Africa, we tend to want to move more to Europe. I think that was sort of the consensus. Like, so many people went to England, they went to Germany, to the Netherlands, a lot of my friends as well for studies and stuff. But I never would have thought Vancouver. And honestly, I didn't even really know which part of North America was Canada. It was sort of like I met this guy from this part of the world, everybody knew America, but we didn't really know Canada as well. So it was quite interesting. But then when we decided we wanted to settle down and get married, we sort of decided to pick Vancouver or Canada out of the two countries. And I did go back for a few years in 2006 when my kids were younger. And we stayed in MLB for about 4.5 years, which was a great experience again for my children. To this day, they still remember that, even though they were little. But the experience is just so different than living in sort of the first world countries as well. And I'm so excited that I was able to provide them that. And we moved back here in 2010, and that's when I sort of went back to CIBC, started working with them again about 10 years ago, and just been raising my kids. So my 20s was sort of travel, see what else is out there. 30s was about raising kids, and now I'm sort of mid 40s, and I'm like, now I'm ready to take on my career again, and my kids are older. And that's sort of the stage that I am right now, which I'm quite excited about as well.
I love it. That's amazing. You have so much experience, and I love hearing it. I'm sure there's a lot more we can probably dive into. But one of the other things, I think especially for like Palesa and I immigrating to Canada, we kind of understand what you're saying in terms of people wanting to go either to Europe or to America, and Canada is not usually something that people think about. I know for our family, we ended up going to the Netherlands for 5.5 years after we were living in Zambia, and Palesa can speak on her experience too. But yeah, it's kind of, we definitely understand like where you're coming from with that, and the educational background that pushes you to get where you need to be.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We have a lot of similarities in your story. I'm from South Africa myself, and so
another Southern African.
Yeah, so being born just on the cusp of the fall of apartheid, I really understand the transition between that and what we have now. And I had always told my family that I wanted to travel and I wanted to go, and like I wouldn't be living in South Africa for my whole life. And my mom couldn't believe it. And I also didn't know what Canada was until I found UBC. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a weird place, I guess. And a lot of things about Vancouver are still very wild and different. But I really am fortunate to be able to make the choice to live here, and then to be afforded the opportunity to do work on this land as well, and then to gain some community. So it's definitely been with its challenges, but it's also been really rewarding.
And isn't it true, Palesa, especially for you from South Africa too, now with how the world has changed, especially with what's been happening in America with Black Lives Matter and everything, and people in Canada still tend to want to not really address that. It's still sort of, it's a state's problem. It's not necessarily happening here. And ever since I moved here, I moved to North Vancouver, seriously too. Like, I kept looking around, trying to find people that look like me or that's from that part of the world. And it's just, you don't necessarily find that. You don't necessarily see that. And so for someone like me growing up with that, I've just always been so aware of it too. And and I find a lot of the times too, if I try to talk to people that I meet here about it, it's like, oh no, we don't have that problem, or that's not how it is. But they don't necessarily want to address it as well, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree with you. I think for me, I think both of you have more of a different experience with that, having it more, I guess, with going through that in Africa. Whereas for us, it's living in the Netherlands, there was a whole different experience in that and the way people kind of treated situations. And I mean, they still do blackface every Christmas, like, but recognizing it as something that's a tradition and needs to continue and keep pushing it and asking why do we need to not change that. So in my experience, that growing up in that kind of environment was definitely different because everything was always in your face. And I do feel like now going back to the Netherlands, it has changed a lot more than before. I think before there wasn't really any conversation we were having in that. And I remember being made fun of all the time for my skin color, or kids just like calling us names and stuff like that. Or I think one time my sister got like bullied by some boy, like just calling her names, just things like that that we kind of experienced as being the only Black kids in every school, pretty much. Because if you look at our school pictures, it's like everyone's like blonde, blue eyes, and then there's like random, like my sister and I, and like random like group shots in elementary. And so it was really, we stood out, and we were just different, and we were new. And so at the same time, as children are trying to figure out what is this kind of newness, there was also space I allowed there because it was new. And so it's kind of that balance, but I understand what you're saying, and how here
Yeah.
we kind of don't acknowledge things at all, with all the things that go on. I mean, even with the Aboriginal population
Yeah.
here, it's just like it's always dismissed and always considered as
Yeah.
a they problem when it's not. It's we have to actually start addressing
Some
our
of these.
marginalized community. Yeah.
And to a degree, we have seen good changes, right, as well. Like I can see it amongst my friends in the community that I am. People want to talk about it. People want to learn more about it, and really with the history of Canada as well, with the Indigenous people, this should have been done a long time ago, and not necessarily just addressed now. But I guess it's never too late as well for everybody to kind of want to learn about it.
For sure. So moving here, how was your experience being a Black woman entering the workforce? Or as you said, you were also raising your children at the time. Was there a significant kind of difference that you noticed moving here in North Vancouver, I guess, because that's also a whole different experience, I feel, being in North
I
Vancouver
know.
versus being like downtown or the other cities. Every time I'm there, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man. I do love it.
No, yeah, absolutely. Um, I feel 20 years ago when I went through, a lot of new immigrants are still going through. Like when I talk to people, like remember I came from, yes, it was an African university degree, but I was educated, I had a degree, but I wasn't able to kind of just, and I had a degree of commerce, and so my background in Namibia was working in the auditing field with the government as well. But when you start in a new country, it is so difficult because you really have to start from the bottom. And I don't know if like I've, because of my history with working with the bank and just in general meeting a lot of people from Vancouver that are new immigrants, it is the same question. It doesn't matter even from which country you're from, but it's like you can come with your education, with your degrees that you have from your back home, but it's so hard to get in here in the same field. You really have to start from the bottom as well. But for me, I guess it was okay because I was young. I was late 20s, so at that time it was like, well, I'm willing to do the work and start from the bottom and work myself in the career that I wanted as well. And so I was quite fortunate. I was quite lucky that CIBC at the time was looking to hire people as well, and I was able to get in through the bank. And I do believe that it sort of really helped me. I always say CIBC is the best employer because I raised my kids with them. They pretty much, when my kids were little, I was so fortunate that I was able to have the managers that was aware of what you're going through and who you are, and that sort of really has helped me raising my kids as well. And so I was lucky in a way that I was able to get in. I had to start from the bottom as a teller, but by just sort of walking around, talking to people, getting connections, I was able to kind of build and sort of move from one role to the next role in a fairly quick sort of a period. Because a lot of the times we come here and you have all these sort of great ideas as to what you want to do and where you want to go, but then you hit the reality and it's like, nope, you can't exactly just get in that advisory role or in that role right now. You kind of have to start from the beginning. And so even though it was sort of a step back from where I was coming from, it really allowed me to just get started, and then I was able to show my abilities and what I can do, and it's just kind of work my way up over the years. And as with most women, my career really sort of took a bit of a stall when I was raising my kids, and it wasn't because I didn't want to be in this high powers sort of positions or anything like that. It was just that I made the conscious decision that if I leave the office at 5 o'clock, I want to leave whatever is there behind, and then I have to be a mom. So it really was sort of my choice to just be there for, and looking back now, I'm forever grateful that I did. Maybe looking at, say, someone else my age, probably male, maybe way further now where they are, where I am, but the decision was mine at the time. And a lot of women, I'm not unique, and a lot of women are struggling with all of this on a regular basis, to have to choose between following your career or raising your kids. And if you can do both, kudos to you. I think that's amazing. But for me, it was more, I want to be able to be there for my kids and sort of raise them. And that's what I did as well. But when I actually moved back to Namibia, it was great because I was working with an investment firm there from South Africa. And so they had a small office in Namibia, and I was hired, which is sort of the opposite. When I moved back after only 6 years of experience here, Namibia, I was sort of like, oh, we need more skilled people. We need more experienced people. We can put you in this sort of leadership position right away. So it's almost like the opposite, right? Here you struggle just to get in. And when you go back, they need people with skills and experience and education background to be able to get into those positions as well. So I was fairly quickly, once we went back and I wanted to get back into the workforce, I really didn't have to. Bear in mind too, I grew up with a lot of people there. I went to university there. So you had a lot, way more sort of organic environment that you can connect with than what I have in Vancouver. Here I had to work for everybody that I know, whereas there I can walk on the street and I see someone that I went to high school with. So this was a little bit of a difference there as well. But I truly enjoyed it. I loved traveling to Cape Town, Johannesburg. This was sort of my, for work, I'd have to travel, but really enjoyed it. Loved being back with my family when I was there. Again, that's where I sort of really got my teeth in the investment environment. And then when I came back to Canada, I was lucky enough that CIBC hired me back. Again, not necessarily, I was looking to get into sort of the same type of role that I was doing back in Namibia and South Africa. And even though it was a South African company, again, sort of here is the consensus, it's not quite to the same level as what it is in Canada. But luckily, like I said, I was very fortunate that CIBC hired me back. And then I just kind of I did different roles over the years within the bank as well.
It's amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. I was born and raised in Vancouver, so it's a very different experience for me. But my mom immigrated here from Kenya, and she had to start all over again. And she came here with the promise that she wouldn't have to start all over again, but she did. Yeah. So I was the kid watching my mother have to like really just start like cleaning houses and like really go back and go to school and like build up her resume and that kind of thing. So I'm seeing it from the other side, and I just like always applaud all these women who like hold it down while they're like remembering all the stuff that they have brought with them, like from, you know, home, and being like, I did this stuff, like I have to redo it, but like biting the bullet and, you know, doing it for their family, and just, you know, taking those steps to really advance themselves and instill like education. And that's totally true. My mom was like, all y'all, it's all sisters. So it's like, all y'all are getting papers. You just need to make sure that you can support yourself. And that's the thing. One question that I had, I know that you've had like this very expansive career in banking and in finance. What is it like being, a Black woman in finance in a country where the Black population isn't very significant or high? Because back in Namibia, you grew up there, you had friends there, but like here it's a little different. And like, even like you said, being a woman in general, you have to make those decisions about raising your kids and then advancing your career and like, weighing it out. But then also like the additional layer of being a Black woman in finance. I think that is something that we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Great question. Thanks, Elle. And I think I'll sort of start off by saying women overall in finance is a challenge, right? Like that has always been, if you were to look at it from in a sort of investment advisory capacity, you'll see that overall just it's always been a more male dominated world as well. So you constantly feel like you have to break these barriers in order to be seen. On top of that, being a woman of color as well, or Black women too, that also has that extra layer now. For me, I've always been I was saying to someone the other day, I always felt like I had to be such a hothead to be heard. You know what I mean? Like I had to be, not, I wouldn't necessarily say aggressive, but you always have to speak up so that people know who you are. And I think I've always done it, not necessarily in the beginning when I was younger in the most diplomatic ways either, but I've always been sort of able to get my message across and to be able to not be afraid to speak up. That's always been something about me that I've always been like, if I see that something can be done a different way or that something is wrong, I've always had that ability. But being in a world which is so male dominated, you constantly have to be worried too that you're not going to be seen as being too aggressive or, and this is overall, I think all women have sort of that sense that we just need to constantly have to be watching and so that you don't. When I was younger, I was definitely more outspoken and more in a way that now I put a little bit more finesse on it. I think the age have sort of made it a little bit easier where I can still say the same thing, but I don't necessarily have to say it to just get the hairs on people's backs going as well. In terms of my career, I think I've always been, whenever I was sort of ready to want to move on to the next step, I've always had good support, that I knew what I wanted to do, and that I was sort of like, okay, well, I was doing this, for instance, one particular role within the bank. And then when I was ready, I kind of said, no, maybe I should take this on. But I've had a lot of mentors along the way too, which kind of help, because I remember having to switch from a role that was completely salary based to sort of a variable pay. So all of a sudden I wasn't going to be too sure where the next paycheck would look like, but then it was still within the bank. So I kind of knew that I still had that support. But being a single mom of 2 kids at that time, this was about 5 years or so ago, it was the most terrifying thing that I could ever think about doing. But having to talk to other people about it, having had good friends, mentors that I can kind of go to and say, I'm thinking about doing this, what do you think? It really helped me in a way. And so I was able to kind of make that decision to move onto those roles as well. But just, I think overall, if I were to look back at my career in terms of being a Black woman in finance, there definitely, I think when I was ready and then I wanted to go for opportunities, I felt like there was a lot of support there, like I was able to do that. And not just with my company, but I think overall, I'm hoping to see more women of color in sort of the executive roles as well. Like right now, we see a lot of women of different, whether if different ethnicities and different diverse backgrounds in sort of your middle management roles, but we don't see a lot of this sort of the top reporting to the CEO executive level. First of all, not a lot of women. And on top of that, not a lot of women of color. So I'm hoping that over the next couple of generations that will change, that we can see more women having the equal opportunities and equal chances that everybody else is having as well, which is something I'm hoping to see that would change, but which I think can use some work. But I was so excited recently when CIBC hired our head of legal was a Black woman. And when they sent it out and they made an announcement about it, I right away emailed her and I'm like, I'm so excited. You should see, I think all of us who is sort of, from African descent or Black descent, who is sort of so excited just to see her being like the head of legal, and she's Black, and I think our CEO is so much trying to make changes. So it's positive. We're seeing some of those changes. So I'm quite excited to hope that over the next little while it'll change.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yes. I love to see Black women and women of color be given their flowers, as they say, and also based on merit. I think this is a conversation that Nataizya and myself were having with somebody else the other day, is that, we're definitely loving that a lot of companies and brands are coming out there, and wanting to be more diverse, right? And definitely scale up in terms of, providing upper management to be more diverse as well. But the way that they're doing it to kind of tokenize the fact that somebody gets promoted. So for example, if they dedicate like the next 3 jobs are going to go to, Black women or women of color, then sometimes it can be a little hard to get that position because people might not necessarily think it's because you're merited for it, you're filling a quota. And so in the banking world, and, obviously as CIBC seems to be expanding, do you think that they're handling that in more of like a merited manner, or do you think that they'll be kind of, doing a quota thing and then, I'll ask my next one afterwards.
No, and thank you. That's a great question. I absolutely believe it is merit. Like I said, I think a lot of the bank has always done a fantastic job in having well diversified, sort of like diverse group of people that they hire. I think it's just the bank has always supported different people from different backgrounds, and I don't think it ever really, to me, a lot of the times the jobs came back down to, do you have the abilities, are you able to do it, and you will get it. At least in my experience, I've never felt I got a job because of the color of my skin. I always thought I got the job because I have the ability, or they know that I've got the skills and the experience to be able to do the job.
Awesome. And then my second question was, with it, I know, thinking about finances myself, there's a bit of debt that I would love to pay off. And, sometimes I fall into this cycle every time I, pay off my credit card all the way down. Then I think to myself, like, okay, I'll never catch myself in a position where my credit card is at that level again. And what I'm going to do is be proactive about it. So instead, I'm going to load money from my debit card onto my credit card before I use the credit card. And that way I'm always keeping one step ahead. But then I always find myself in a different situation where my credit card is high and my debit card money is spent. So I'm spending twice the amount of money that I'm assuming I have. And I'm wondering, as somebody in finance, what do you think that is? Where do you think that comes from? And what are some ways that I could stop doing that?
So, this is a topic that I feel very strongly about. So thank you so much for raising that. The short answer is we need to set you up to have an emergency fund. We need to start we need to start looking at how can we help you grow your savings so that when a big expense comes up, you're not just using your day-to-day debit card to buy for those big expenses, right? So really the question for me is always to people about, we know that, and trust me, I've lived in Vancouver for how many years now. It's an expensive city. It's not cheap to live here. I feel like my paycheck just goes into groceries. It seems like my grocery bill goes up every week, like seriously, and having 2 teenagers doesn't help either. But that's where I feel like all my money is growing. So for me, what is important to have is to have a plan. So what you need to, and again, this comes back to a lot of women doesn't necessarily have the same knowledge and experience about investing than men. Like I remember my dad used to take care of all of our expenses. My dad died a little over 25 years ago. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She had to start taking over those expenses. And she did it without any help from any of her children. She was way better at saving and looking after her finances than I think, like she was just an eye-opener to see how this woman who was getting like maybe a couple of bucks a week from her husband to help pay for some of the groceries and expensive, to all of a sudden have to look after it all. And she did it, and she was amazing at it. So I think the lesson for us is to be able to have a proper plan in place. And you don't necessarily even have to have a budget. I always keep saying that you can start off with as little as $25 a week or a month or per paycheck, whatever you can afford. When I was doing investment planning with my clients, I always used to say, I went downtown once and I had a glass of wine at one of the restaurants and it cost $21. So I'm like, here I am sitting and paying 20 something dollars for a glass of wine. I mean, I like my wine and I'll go to the restaurant and I'll order it. But if you just think about these little things, these little expenses that we spend money on, how can we make our personal finances better? And a lot of it starts with a plan. And coming back to your question about it's Vancouver, cost of living is high. You will have, a lot of us have debt, like we end up having to use our credit cards to pay for something. But at the same time, and even if you want to pay off that debt, that's fine, but have a savings plan in place as well. So look at your, there's this book by, which is called The Wealthy Barber. I don't know if it's a Canadian author. I don't know if you guys have ever read it, but I read it years ago. And one of the first concepts he introduced in there is pay yourself first by doing regular, monthly, bi-weekly, weekly deductions off of your salary, off of your paychecks, or out of your bank account on a regular basis, and pay yourself first. That's what it comes down to. So what I used to advise my clients is to say, for instance, you have $50 or $75 a month that you are willing to put aside. Obviously, we don't want you to be doing more than what you can afford. But then you say, okay, $25 is going to go into my emergency fund. The other $25 is for my sort of short to medium term, whether it's to buy a new car, go on vacation in a year or two, that's sort of what that other $25. And the last $25 is for my retirement, because I want to be able to put money aside for my retirement as well. So, and that's how I would break down my whatever I can afford on a monthly basis. So, Palesa, when that expense does come up, that you now need to urgently buy something, so your car broke down or you need to be able to pay for something right away, you are able to right away go into your emergency fund, take money from there and pay for it as well. So, and using a thing like the tax-free savings account, or for your retirement, you can use your registered retirement savings account like RRSPs. Like those are really just easy and quick ways where I remember my clients used to say to me, yeah, but if I just do it automatically every month by myself, I may use the money again. Well, then that's why you put it into a registered product like a tax-free savings account or an RRSP, the registered savings plan, so that it's not as easy to just transfer it back and forth between the bank account and the Visa card as well. You actually have to make an effort to call in or to go see someone to get the money out as well. So I feel like the overall history or the research has shown us that women does want to save more. We can earn higher returns based on what it is that you are saving for and what type of underlying investments you choose. And really it is about to plan with a purpose. And a lot of the times, if you think about it, if I start the same age as a guy, same role, chances are he's getting paid more. Like, we know that that's a reality. So, and men tend to take more risks as well to help their savings grow. There was a study done which basically showed that men would actually, their first financial goal is to invest. Like, I don't even know, like up until I was forced to being on my own and sort of look up after my finances as well, my goal was really just to sort of pay day-to-day expenses and survive on a regular basis. But once I started looking into it, I was like, yes, I do have my day-to-day expenses and I do have all of these that I need to take care of, but I also want to have a savings plan in place. And studies have shown that women actually, in the long term, does better on our investments, because we don't necessarily want to take all of those high risk and get all of the aggressive risk that you take and get all of the high returns in the short term. We kind of invest for the long term and is willing to take sort of smaller little bumps along the way of your investments growing. And what I used to do and what the bank offers as well, and if a lot of the listeners are out there, if you are unsure of where to go, who do you talk to, there's a lot of information available online, but it is overwhelming. So what I used to do in my previous role before I joined business banking is I would sit with each and every client and come up with a plan. And we'll be like, these are some common questions that you can ask yourself. And then we will come up with recommendations on where to put the money. You don't have to do this on your own. You don't have to sit there and figure out what mutual fund should I get? Well, what stock should I buy? There are those options where you can do it yourself and you can learn it yourself, but there are also enough tools and resources available through the banks or other investment firms that you can actually go and do it yourself. And a lot of the times is you don't need to have a lot of wealth. You don't need to have sort of big money to be able to get in. You can start, like I said, I used to tell my clients, you can start with as little as $25 a month. And I always used to say that's like 2 or 3 coffees like a week at Starbucks as well. Like, we all know how expensive Starbucks can be. So if you really just kind of wanted to start off with a plan, have something where you can set it up so that when those expenses happen, you have a safety net that you can go to be able to cover those expenses instead of having to move money around between the two as well. I hope that sort of in a long way, sort of broad sense, help you and provide some answers for you as well. But it definitely is a topic that's very close to my heart. And I've always wanted to do free consultations. When I retire one day, that's all I'm going to do is do free consultations to women on what to invest, how to invest, and how to set up a plan.
I mean, I'll probably be signing up for that class. So thank you.
I'm signing up beforehand. You're going to be practicing on me before you do it.
That's right.
I'll just be your guinea pig. That's fine.
Yeah.
And then just a quick clarification in there as well. So you mentioned to have a plan and not necessarily a budget. What would the difference be between the two? Because a lot of the help that I've received through Google, because Google is my best friend, has been, you get a budget, and then there's like all these budgeting apps, and then we'll track your money and we'll categorize it for you, and we'll tell you. And so I thought like being more conscious of where it was going and being like, okay, maybe I spend a bit on food here, maybe my expenses on entertainment are a little bit more. At first, I thought that would be helpful because I know more about where my money is going, but it isn't. In fact, I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. So I guess I am doing what I think I'm doing. And it really hasn't changed behavior around like knowing more and then makes it better to save money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. And I always used to say, like, once I looked at this budget app calculator on the Government of Canada website, I think I was looking for something. And it stressed me out because after a while they were asking how much money do I spend on a coffee on a day-to-day basis. And I was just like, this is way too detailed from what I was looking at. So my advice is always look at your expenses. Look at where you spend money on a regular basis. Credit cards are amazing nowadays, where they give you a detailed breakdown of pretty much every year. When I look at that, it breaks my heart that I've spent so much money at restaurants and food and those kind of things. But they can actually tell you exactly like a budget where you've spent most of your money, or all of the funds that, and I use my credit card for everything. So it's easy for me to just look at my credit card at the end of the year and kind of go, okay, maybe I should reduce spending here, or I should increase spending here. So look at your credit card and just see where your expenses are going, or even in your bank account as well. But I would always start at it from what is it that you pay? Because a lot of us have to pay. I've got the 50, there's different rules out there, but the one I believe in is the 50-30-20 rule. Have you guys ever heard of that one?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So basically, 50% is your essentials. So 50% of your income you'll spend on your essentials, which is typically in Vancouver, maybe it's not quite 50% because the rent and mortgage and everything else is so expensive here. But in an ideal world, you kind of want 50% of your income goes towards your essentials, which is, sort of rent, food, bills, utilities, property tax, whatever you need to pay. Those are sort of your 50%. 30% is sort of your fun money. 30% of your income you want to be able to spend more on getting my nails done, getting my hair done. I went to the hairdresser and it cost me like $107. You know what I mean? Like, it's so expensive, all of these things as well. So you do want to include it though in your plan, because it's things that we do, like we're going to buy something for yourself or treat yourself. Those are all expenses that you want to include in there as well. And the 20%, I believe, of that sort of plan is the most important, as well as your savings. That's your investments. So look at your budget and look at your total income that you make, and you can do net, you can do gross, whichever works for you, but have sort of take a certain percentage of whatever you're making and you can start saving that as well. And that sort of ties in with a plan. So having a budget is great, but include in that budget a certain amount that will be for savings. And then you can sort of do short-term goals. Okay, this is emergency. Medium-term goals, this is going back to school, this is for my child's education. Like for me, my kids, both my boys are going to be out of high school within the next 3 years, and being raised by an African mother who was like, you're going to education, you're going to higher education, you're going to go to university. I'm telling my kids the same thing. So I keep saying, you don't really have a choice. Like, I went, my whole family went, I'm making you go. So I don't, like, those are sort of but I have to take that into account to be able to plan for their education as well, plan for retirement. If you're young, you're kind of not even really thinking that far in terms of retirement, then think of it from, if you're employed, some of your employers may match your contributions to your retirement as well. So find out whether they are and take part in that, because that really is just an easy way for you to kind of save for retirement as well. But once you've got sort of the expenses sorted out, how much is then available, let's chat and I can help you then guide, okay, well, I've got this much available. Where do I put it now? And you can do it self-directed. You can do it on your own. You can buy stocks. You can buy mutual funds. There's so many different ways. All have different fees and different options. And those are things that I'm more than happy to sit with you or make an introduction within CIBC to someone that can then help you and guide you to find the right home for whatever it is that you're trying to invest in. Yeah.
Making that generational wealth. I'm here for it.
That's right. And I mean it can get quite complicated as well with having to diversify, and there's different type of asset classes and all of these things too. But I had this conversation a few years ago with my kids. I said, okay, I'm going to use my tax-free savings account. My son started reffing at 12 years old. So they were started making money already. So soccer reffing. So I said, well, I want you to put a certain amount of money away every month and I'll match it for you. But you choose which mutual fund we're going to put it into. So I didn't go into detail. I just kind of said, there's one Canadian one, there's a US one, there's a European one, there's an emerging market one, which is always my favorite because I'm like, I invest in emerging markets. So we were able to kind of choose which one they wanted to go into. And then on a monthly basis, I will transfer from their accounts. It just keeps going in there, and then I'll match that as well for them too. So even though it's not in an education fund, but it's money that by the time they finish high school, they'll have access to this and they can use it whether to buy a car or move into their first apartment, whichever way they want to use it as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I don't know. Do you two have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I really am, I'm processing that 50, 30, 20 and recognizing that like, I think I kind of have been doing that in the past, but like not at all with the savings thing. Like if I happen to have anything left over in my paycheck, it's like, that's actually going to pay debt. So like, I'm trying to like pay my debt down because I'm like, I just don't want it anymore. And, you know, sitting in COVID, we can't do anything. I'm like, well, I'm not spending money on drinks anymore. I'm not spending money on dinners out. So like, might as well pay my debt down. But I think like restructuring my thought process around that, I think even moving forward once things open up will be very helpful to like take what I've learned in this time period and what you've said and make sure I'm applying it to my life in the future and not just going the pendulum the other way and going, we're free, and like spend all the money and then it's like backtracking, you know.
And that is so important now, because I feel that we'll always have debt, right? We live in Vancouver, it's expensive. There's always going to be that loan that you want to pay off or that Visa card that you want to get off. And of course, the interest rates on those are definitely higher than having the money just sit in a savings account and you're making way less on interest in that than what you are paying interest on these Visa cards or loans. But at the same time, like if you had money just sitting in a savings account and your Visa bill is high, I'd be the first one to say, transfer it over, pay off that Visa card. But at the same time, I would also say, well, how much of this can we kind of invest for the longer term, which can maybe give you a little bit more of a return or growth than what it's doing right now, just sitting in that account as well. So it's having a good balance, as with everything. I'm Libra, so balance is all about balance in my life. So it's about having that good balance in still wanting to pay off the debt. We still want to get you debt free, but we also want to make sure that you don't go into more debt when you need to, an emergency comes up or something needs to be paid. We want you to have this hand as well, that you can kind of make sure that you have funds there to be able to provide you whatever expenses that is coming up.
That's
so
great.
Yes, good luck with it. I think it's great. It's I've got a line of credit. I use it. I pay it off. I use it. I pay it off. But I also have got my savings, and that's where I'm quite happy to put money into for the long term, for short term, for medium term. But I'm also going to work on paying off the line of credit on the side as well.
Thank you. That's great.
That's really helpful. I think that that's a great kind of segue into introducing that you'll be doing our next event in January 30th. I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
And I think that more people will be able to kind of know more in detail everything that you just said and have it have question answer time, but also learn more of kind of what that looks like. And so I'm really excited for it. I think this is something that we all try to figure out during this time, like Elle said, even during COVID. And so, I'm really excited about it. And I hope that everyone can join us to be able to come to this event. And if you have any questions beforehand, make sure to write them down. And I hope this podcast was helpful for you. And so thank you so much for being our guest, Liza. And I really appreciate just hearing more of your story. And I'm sure even after the event, we'll connect more with you. And hopefully when the world finally opens up, we can actually have a in-person event and actually have like a seminar and, actually make it bigger than just virtual. But we really appreciate that you were our guest today, and an honor to have you here and speak on your story and just to hear about more of you.
Oh, thank you so much. And I tend to ramble on a little bit too, but I hope the message was clear that it's more about we want to be able to get to that financial independence, to get our financial power back. And I'm more than willing to help and assist along the way to see how can we all get there. Because I feel like in this world that we're living in, there's so much happening already, and that we all want to be able to be ready and prepared for anything that could happen, and that we can walk away from situations or jobs and know that financially I'm secure and that's being looked after as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I look forward to seeing what I actually sound like.
You'll sound great. Everyone's always nervous, and they'll look back and it's amazing. You did great. It was really engaging. Yeah, we loved it. Okay, well, thank you so much for being our guest, and we'll see you January 30th.
Sounds good. Thank you guys. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. It's always amazing to get an opportunity to chat with these lovely ladies. So if you're looking to follow us off of the podcast and you're looking to catch up with some of the content that we have, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube, all at Black Women Connect Vancouver. And we also have a website for you at blackwomenconnectvancouver.com, which is where you can sign up for our mailing list and our newsletter so you can keep updated with our growth and all of the other events that we have planned for you. Catch you later. Bye.